The Business is sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants.
Good evening and welcome to The Business. I'm Roma Bhowmick and you're listening to the show that's essential listening for the West Herts business community. What's the best way to attract clients or customers to your business? Most small businesses are formed by people who are very good at what they do, and knowing your market's key, but that's only half the equation. Marketing's arguably the most important business aspect for any small company. After all, no customer, no business. Tonight, we're looking at how different business owners manage the job of attracting customers. We've got contributions from Mike Meldrum from the Mortgage Mine, Joe Bain from Oyster Studios, Maud Haddon from Follow That Lead, and joining us in the studio, Ronnie Munster, Associate Finance Director of EFM, providing financial expertise to business. But first, as ever, I'm joined by my colleagues, Trevor Merriden on Twitter. And if you want to tweet Trevor, he's on at RVTheBusiness. And here in the studio, Clare McAnulty. Hello, Clare. What's in the news for you this week?
Well, I thought this week, instead of doing just covering the news, because we're doing the show on how to get clients, I thought I'd pass on 3 tips of my own for getting clients. And my first would be a very obvious one, I suppose, but know who your clients are. Are they sole traders? Are they medium-sized or large businesses? And it does sound obvious, but when you start a business, it can sometimes take quite a while to work out who would be your best clients. Once you get a fit, everything else becomes much easier because you then know when to look. The second tip would be to find other complementary companies and people that you can share work with. That way you can be of mutual benefit to each other, and it also opens out the number of clients you both come in contact with. Thirdly, have a website, so have a home, if you like, on the internet, somewhere that you can direct people to for more information or to let them see your portfolio. Potential clients want to see results, and they also want to see the other companies you've worked for. If it's appropriate, have a testimonial page from satisfied clients. Personally, I always find that people go from the home page almost straight to the testimonial page. Is a very, very popular page. Now, all businesses are different, as we'll hear tonight. There are different strategies that have worked for different people. Are there any tips particularly that you have for getting clients, Roma?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I think what a good idea to share your tips, Claire. I think we forget that we're out there too.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it also it's about understanding as best you can what they're looking for. And I think some sectors are easier to do that than others. But knowing exactly what they want is really important, rather than just thinking about selling your service or product. So, on to my story. So, do you live in an entrepreneurial hotspot? So, 2014 was a good year for entrepreneurship in the UK, with over 580,000 new businesses launched, according to Startup Britain's daily tracker, on an online tool that counts the new businesses registered each year. It's a significant increase on 2013. In fact, for the third year in a row, the number of startups has increased. A recent study showed, interestingly, that there seem to be hotspots for success. So, although the strongest startup activity is still in London and the South East, which is something we've kind of known for a while, cities further north, like Birmingham and Manchester, had a higher number of startups last year than in 2013. Birmingham's responsible for the most new companies outside the South. Interesting stuff, given that we're supposedly still in recession, or have been. It seems that this flurry of success has been influenced by government-backed startup loans and other financial support programs, as well as specialist mentoring. So it's interesting stuff, but I'm surprised that there are so many new companies, although we've always been quite positive about it all, haven't we, Claire?
Yeah, I don't know that it works by deciding geographically where these companies are, because I think quite often, there are probably companies businesses starting everywhere in the UK? I mean, it's difficult to say if there is a hot spot for businesses starting.
I would imagine that if I looked at that report in more detail, that probably some of that is that there's a high concentration of finance down here in the southeast, and possibly that's the reason the figures showed that way. But you're right. I think across the board, more and more people are doing their own thing, which is great. Okay, so lots to talk about tonight, and we're going to do so after we take a quick break. We'll be back.
The Business, sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
Trestle Art Space is a community art space and registered charity situated in Russet Drive in Highfield Park. Home to Trestle Theatre Company and world-renowned Trestle Masks. We offer a wide range of arts-based activities as well as professional theatre shows, monthly live music showcases with licensed bar and a gallery cafe with exhibitions from local artists. Our 100-year-old converted chapel is also available to hire for weddings, private parties and business meetings. To find out more, please visit our website at trestle.org.uk and please support us in bringing affordable arts to our community.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
Join Simon Carver on Fridays from 6:30 p.m. for The Film Guide. We look at the UK cinema box office top 10, a selection of the new cinema releases and the best of the week's films on free-to-air TV. That's Fridays from 6:30 p.m. on West Hart's Drive Time with Danny Smith, exclusively on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Welcome back. And so to the theme for our show. It's great to finally get that idea you have off the ground, but how do you make sure you keep clients or customers coming through the door? Everyone has their own opinion of what works and what doesn't work, and what's right for you might not be right for another person. As usual, the team have been out and about this week speaking with some of the many local business owners to find out what their tips for success are. And we're very pleased to be joined this evening by Ronnie Munster from EFM. Hi, Ronnie.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Ronnie, perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Okay, our business, we provide finance directors specifically to the SME market. So we aim to help those small and medium-sized enterprises who need skilled financial people but don't have the resources to have a full-time FD and don't need one. So that's kind of what we do. But the other part of what we do is we're also building a business as well, because we look for finance directors who wish to join our business. So we are like yourselves, and obviously people listening to the show, we're selling our services.
So you're looking for, as you say, you're looking for directors, finance directors to join your business as well as looking for clients. So it's almost like a two-pronged approach for you. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. There are two different angles there, which means that we've got two different approaches, because how you attract a finance director to join us is very different from how you talk to a potential client for looking for a finance director or somebody with financial experience to help them out.
What's the most challenging aspect of trying to tackle things from two different directions, Ronnie?
I think actually there's something that probably covers both in a sense, because people who work in finance, accountants, numbers people, if you like, they tend to be good with numbers but not very good at the whole sales cycle. So they're not very good at selling themselves, and they're not necessarily very good at selling their services. I mean, you don't want to stereotype people as introverted necessarily, but accountants generally find it hard to sell themselves or sell their services, and so that's a perennial problem, and we spend quite a lot of time training people how to win clients and also how to, if you like, bring out their best characteristics when applying to work for us.
You hit on an important point there. It's interesting because, as you rightly say, as professionals, you're at the top of your game. You know exactly what you're doing. You can advise and guide clients effectively. But invariably, it's not unusual that people are not necessarily the best salespeople, as you said, and having to learn the art of sales and the most appropriate approach is of course, really important. Well, we're going to go to our first interview, Ronnie, and Clare met Mike Meldrum of the Mortgage Mine this week, and she started by asking Mike what his business was about.
The business that we run at the moment is called the Mortgage Mine. We're an independent mortgage broker. It's a small firm based in Hertfordshire, providing mortgage services for the whole of the country, actually.
And before that, Mike, you were not self-employed, were you? You were an employee. And when did you become self-employed?
Yeah, I was an employee up till 2006. I'm afraid I'm a little bit too miserable now to work for other people. So what I wanted to do was just provide the service myself and stand or fall by my own talents. And so far, I seem to have a little bit of talent.
When you moved from being an employee to running your own business, Mike, did you find getting clients was one of the top priorities or the most difficult things?
Absolutely. It's incredibly difficult getting through that first 12 months. It's difficult both from the point of view knowing what you say to make your sales effective, but also getting someone to have heard of you. I mean, no one's heard of you for the previous decades of your life, so they don't know who you are on day one when you open your business. It's a really difficult problem for entrepreneurs. And
tell me the type of things that you tried.
Well, I tried quite a lot of things. One of the first things I tried was a mail drop, and to say that was just burning money would be an understatement. Went out and delivered some 2,000 leaflets and got absolutely zero response. We also tried a little bit of using Google AdWords, but our problem was that they were so random. I felt as though I wasn't exactly sure of what the quality of what I'm doing with. And in the mortgage business, I need to know who I'm speaking with. And I wasn't particularly confident I was doing that. Also, we tried a little bit of sponsorship. I sponsored some accountants meetings. All very good, lots of warm, fuzzy words, but no money at the end of it. And finally, what I think I also did was I was purchasing leads, mortgage leads on the internet. They're hard work, but if you've got nothing better, it does the trick.
Mike, you did eventually find something that worked for you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how you came to do that?
Yes. Well, the what actually really works for my business is business networking, and that's attending meetings with fellow people like myself and sharing our client banks to try and generate business for each other. How did I get hold of it? Well, that's, I'm afraid, not a very scientific story. A good friend of mine phoned me up and said, be at a meeting next morning by 7 o'clock or else. And so I was too scared to say no and turned up. But the business networking is an excellent way to generate business. But the great thing about business, about generating it is, or the difficult thing I should say about generating business through networking, is you've really, really got to know what are the benefits that you provide to your customers. Just saying, I provide this service, that service, and the other service, or I'm a family firm, or I'm dedicated, that really doesn't work. What you have to do is to get the message over as to what's the benefit to your customer after they have introduced you to someone else. So, for example, in my business, my fellow networkers know that I'll get them 60% more house for the same amount of income, and that seems to resonate with the people that they talk to.
The other thing to say, Mike, is obviously your business is a financial business, and buying a house is a big thing for people. So do you think that part of the reason networking works for you is that people really have to trust someone like you before they would come and get business from you? Absolutely, Claire. Now, the big thing about business networking is it's a word-of-mouth recommendation, and with the word-of-mouth recommendation becomes the trust.
So clearly, in my industry, it's a real big bonus having a word of mouth recommendation. But really, every business is exactly the same.
If you compare yourself to attending your first meeting, so your first networking meeting to now, do you find that you've learned quite a lot along the way about how to, just what you were saying there, about how to present yourself and how to present your business?
Unbelievable. I have to say to you, the very first time I turned up to a meeting, and everyone in these meetings look as though they can deliver these great scripts effortlessly. But I probably worked for about 12 hours to provide a presentation that was to last 60 seconds. And there was a woman behind me saying, during the whole of my first 60 seconds, but what does he want? What does he want me to do? What does he want? And I didn't have that covered. So effectively, I had wasted my time and I'd wasted their time because they weren't going to be able to help me get an introduction. So knowing what you want is really, really important.
And do you feel that's what you've learned with the networking, that you've actually honed in those business skills, if you like?
Yes, definitely. And definitely both in a networking environment and a customer environment. One of the things that I've really, really learned is how to talk about the benefits to them and not to talk about my business. We're all very proud of our businesses and we do all these different things to get great business. But the customer really doesn't care. The customer just wants to know, give me the service, what's the price, and go and do it. And that's all they really, really care about. And in most people's pitches, they're too busy talking about things like, we've been a family firm for 100 years. I'm afraid I don't care about that. I just want to know what's the benefit to me of you providing that service.
And Mike, just tell us where people will find you. Have you got a website perhaps that people can contact you on?
Yes, if anyone wants to contact me, they can find me at the Mortgage Mind Limited, www.mortgagemind.co.uk. On that, there's a 0800 number if anyone wants to talk to me. And if anyone wants to even just talk to me about generating business sales, I'm more than happy to share my advice and perhaps even recommend them to someone who's even better than me.
Mike Meldrum from the Mortgage Mind, so enthusiastic, wasn't he, Claire? That's always good to hear. So, a number of things that he talked about: mail drops, sponsorship, purchasing leads, but the key thing for him was networking. And as he said, the key to networking successfully was being able to answer the question, what's the benefit to me when it comes to people in the room? Ronnie, do you engage in networking? Is it successful for you?
It is. It is something I engage in. I think there were some important points in what he did, because networking is, if you like, is marketing, and marketing is not sales, and I think you've got to separate the two. So marketing is perhaps spreading the word, and it depends on the product, but for professional services, we find networking events, for example, a lot of firms of accountants and lawyers run seminars on particular aspects of regulation. There are also other professional groups, and we find them very useful to attend those. But it doesn't suit every kind of business, so you have to pick the right kind of networking opportunity. So it's definitely something we do, but it's not necessarily right for all businesses. So I think that's I think going back to his point is knowing who your client is very critical.
And as you say, networking has changed from the sort of traditional simple breakfast meeting, lunch meeting, to so much more, as you say, different events, different presentations. Claire, what about you in the context of what you do in your business? How much do you do in terms of networking?
I think really, as Mike says, probably networking does work for everyone. It just depends what type of networking you do, really. I mean, networking can also mean on social media, for example, on LinkedIn. You can do quite a lot of networking. And I think now, probably in the last 10 years, LinkedIn is quite often combined with going to maybe a networking meeting, and then you can connect with those people later on in LinkedIn. So the whole thing works quite well together, social media and actually the physical thing of going to networking meetings. That's what I find useful anyway.
Well, I mean, a case in point is the way we managed to contact all these wonderful businesses for the business show interviews. Again, for us, Twitter's very successful, Facebook's been very successful, as well as face-to-face, the team getting out there, which is brilliant. Okay, so to another small business based in the Hertfordshire area, we had our own Vicky Scott, who went to meet Joe Bain from Oyster Studios, and Vicky asked Joe to talk us through her top tips.
Oyster Studios do quite a lot of work particularly in the engineering arena and technical arena. How did you build that business?
We've been working very successfully with a London-based marketing agency, and we're their creative arm, and they've brought clients to the table like Shell and Airbus. So we've been doing recruitment marketing, advertising, etc. We felt that there was a credibility to our portfolio and an opportunity to branch out directly. When I joined the team 3 years ago, I started thinking about how to approach the market, and one of the key things that's proved successful is actually going to trade shows and having face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because there's lots of different mechanisms for small businesses to develop business, but going to trade shows, that must have been pretty scary when you're not in the trade. In effect, you're somebody that is doing something completely different. They're wanting to talk engineering and you're wanting to talk lovely pictures. How does that work and how difficult is it?
It is challenging, and it does take confidence to walk up to a stranger. I think the key thing is to admit that you're not particularly knowledgeable, and by being interested and asking lots of questions and challenging what they're doing and why they're doing it, actually people find that engaging, and they're interested to share their expertise. So I tend to go and be very honest and say I'm researching the marketplace, I'm visiting a client here, and I'm doing a bit of floor walking to understand what's going on in the industry, what the challenges that businesses are facing, and how we can potentially support them moving forward.
How do those people feel? Because they're on a stand trying to sell their product, and then they come across somebody that's trying to sell to them. You know, that's one of the big problems with trade fairs. But it sounds as though it's really worked. So how do you overcome that problem?
I think by being very aware of that. So I will say, can I just take your card and get back to you? Clearly, you're here to do business. Sometimes people are actually really happy to talk because it's a slow footfall day, for example. So it's being respectful of the situation.
Do you plan the time that you're going to visit on the basis of, what's going to be the quietest day, what's going to be the time when they're most likely to be, available, or, at what point in the process of a trade show do people get bored and want to talk about something different or talk about, some different aspect of their business? Do you plan that at all?
I avoid the first day of a show where possible because they're setting up and they're gearing up to talk to their customers. I'm not very strategic about which stands I go to, and I don't plan as much as you might think because inevitably the stand is really busy and you just have to walk on. So it's more a game of numbers. It takes a lot of caffeine and a lot of hard work, floor walking up and down, and you just have to remind yourself that it just takes one big contract, 20 grand off the back of a trade show, and it was worth all the backache and the sore feet.
That's really, really interesting. Are there any plans to go and get involved in more trade shows in different sectors?
This year, in the first half, we're actually going to focus again on engineering and manufacturing. There are plenty of shows to go after. Moving forward, we're investigating a couple of other channels. So we think there's an opportunity in destination marketing and the visitor economy. We're working closely with St Albans, and we've rebranded that. So we've got credibility to take to market. So definitely more looking at that as an opportunity, and potentially looking at education, but my thoughts are at the moment do more on the engineering and marketing side, collaborating with other expertise and raising our profile in that sector. We've created a bespoke microsite. We're doing HTML. We've done direct mail, old-fashioned letters to engineering firms within a 50-mile demographic. Again, very focused, and I think that's paying dividends.
I do love old-fashioned letters. They've worked enormously well for my clients. Whilst everybody else is zapping, you zip, and it can work well. That's really helpful, Joe. Good luck in your endeavours. That's Joe Bain, who's the Sales and Marketing Manager of Oyster Studios Limited, based in Harpenden.
So that's Joe there, attending trade shows and sending old-fashioned letters. You don't get much of those nowadays. What do you think about trade shows, Ronnie?
I personally haven't been to any that are relevant, but I do know one client who actually got a very good lead from it unexpectedly. So I think if you've got the right product, if you're bringing a product that's going to provide a solution to a client, then yes, I think you should use a trade show. But again, you need to match your product with the client's needs. If you're just going to a trade show because it seems like it could be fun, then no, or hard, because they're generally hard work. My experience from a colleague is that they're kind of 12, 14 hours days in a darkened hall somewhere in the middle of the country, and you don't get out for anything other than a stale cheese sandwich. So.
Yes, I'm thinking back, Ronnie, to the days where I've been walking the floor at trade shows. But it's interesting. I mean, case in point, of course, at one point they came away with a 20k contract effectively. But I think what you say is correct, that, trade shows, it's a difficult one. I think you have to be even more specific about why you're there. I've tended to see if I can book appointments in advance of going to a trade show, set up meetings so I can catch up with people there. So I've got a specific reason to be there rather than, as you rightly say, wandering around aimlessly in the dark.
Although one of the positive things is that people are there, and they are there to talk. And I mean, we've all been to trade shows where people have not gone up to a stand, where somebody's maybe at a stand with all their paraphernalia and all their brochures, and nobody's approaching it, and they're probably quite happy for people to engage them in conversation, I guess, So.
Yes.
Or the opposite, they jump out at you.
I went to a trade show as a visitor for accounting software. That's obviously a specialist area that we look at. And one of the things I found is some of the various stands, they had some very attractive people at each stand, but we had some quite technical questions. Mm-hmm. And when we asked them, they said, don't know, I'll write that down and somebody will get back to you. And that's really disappointing, because you think, I'm here to research whatever it was we were researching, and clearly they didn't know, and so I automatically scrub these people away from my list. Yes. So if you can't provide the answers to potential clients, maybe you shouldn't be there, or maybe you just have to staff it properly.
Yeah, that's not very clever, really, is it?
No, not really. No, well, I mean, it's interesting as ever, more and more coming out, and we've got some interesting stuff going on Twitter, so keep tweeting us on @RVTheBusiness, or you might want to email us, thebusiness@radioverulam.com, and we'll be back after a few short announcements.
The Business, sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants. At Kingston Smith, our ethos is simple. We want our clients to succeed. Welcoming owner-managed businesses and individuals, we pride ourselves on offering the local business community a range of services that best supports their needs for maximum growth. Kingston Smith, helping our clients succeed. Find us on St Peter Street in the heart of St Albans, or for more information, head to kingstonsmith.co.uk.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
If you enjoy singing and are looking for an uplifting musical experience, the St Albans Choral Society guarantees a friendly welcome to new members. The choir numbers around 80, rehearses on Thursday evenings in central St Albans, and performs at various local venues including St Albans Abbey. If you have a reasonable voice and like a musical challenge, go along and join them. For further details, see their website, choralsociety.com, or call the membership secretary on 01727 831 838.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners. If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Business. I'm Roma Bhowmick and I'm here with Clare McAnulty, Trevor Merriden in the virtual Twitter sphere, and our guest Ronnie Munster of EFM. And tonight we're looking at best ways of attracting clients or customers to your business. We've talked about networking with Mike Meldrum of The Mortgage Mine and how to use trade shows effectively with Joe Bain of Oyster Studios. So what are the other options? Well, one of the options, which I always used to dread, is the phone. Phone calling or cold calls seems to have fallen out of popularity. But making calls to potential clients is still considered by some people to be a very effective way of getting new business. Apparently, the secret lies in the way you go about it, I guess, as with every other thing. A number of years ago, Maud Haddon set up a small cold calling business called Follow That Lead. Clare spoke to Maud and started by asking why she thought cold calling works.
It works well if you're targeted and you're calling the right sort of people who, in theory, should be interested in whatever product or service you have. So, for example, if you're selling designer glasses frames and you target opticians, well, that's a perfect match. The opticians are the people that buy new frames. So as long as you're aiming your phone calls at people who in theory should be interested, then I think that personal touch where you can give some benefits in a very short space of time, maybe a minute and a half maximum, answer some questions for them, cut to the chase, and get their calendar. They have their calendar, you have yours, and you can get the meeting booked. So I think that personal touch is surprisingly a strong thing, as long as it's targeted in the right way.
And is that very much the key, do you think, Maud, that it has to be targeted? You actually already have to have qualified them, if you like, before you phone them?
Yes, I think so. At dinner parties, when people used to ask me what I did, I used to say I did cold calling, and it was a real conversation stopper because the and I don't say that anymore because I say it differently. And the reason it's such a conversation stopper, I think, is that we all know those calls that come in at 6 o'clock at night. You've just got in from work. You're just about to have your dinner or something, you're looking after your children, and you get these calls, people mispronouncing your name, ringing up and asking, how's your day? And then they go on to try and sell you something. And, it may be double glazing and you're already double glazed. It could be anything under the sun, but they have no idea if you have it or not, or if you're even the sort of person that might be interested. So I think people shudder when you say cold calling, but actually, if you do target it and do it in a professional manner, it can be incredibly beneficial for a company.
And how do you use LinkedIn? Because I understand you use LinkedIn quite a lot now with cold calling.
So we love LinkedIn. LinkedIn, you can put in a company name and find all the employees who are on LinkedIn for that company. You can have a search through their job titles, get a feel for who you think might be interested in your product, and then go quickly look up the profile and have a good look and see, because a lot of people have quite a lot of detail on their LinkedIn profiles, so you can get a good idea, a good feel if that is the sort of person that you want to speak to. So it's fantastic from that point of view. And also, if you go onto the LinkedIn profile, some of them have contact numbers and email addresses, and some of them, when you connect with them, then show you their contact details. So it's a fabulous tool.
So really a lot of it is preparation, and in order for it to work well, you have to do a fair bit of preparation.
Say you see these 6 people that you really would love a meeting with, you know they're exactly the right type of people, and you send off 6 invitations to connect. If some of those people then connect with you, that's when it's sort of more warmed up a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you call them and you say, oh, we're connected on LinkedIn, and then you go on to explain why you're calling, it does feel slightly warmer.
Do you think your service works better for one business or another, or do you think it works for most businesses? What's been your finding?
I've had experience of working in my own business as a sole trader, working for other sole traders, and it was very successful for them. I then went on to work for an SME. They were a firm of independent financial advisors, and it worked very well for them. They bought a list, and they, as a result of the calling and meetings, they got a public company who then became a customer. I then, after I'd been in my own business for a couple of years, I then went to work for one of my clients, which was an IT startup company at the time, and it's now, rapidly expanded. And that size of company, 40 employees worldwide at the moment, but expanding. It's been really a great help for them from their inception till now. So I think it can benefit all sorts of companies.
Wow, lots of success there from Jo. And in fact, it sounds like she's got the measure of cold calling. She got herself a job, which was really
one of her clients actually. So one of her clients that used Maud for doing a number of calls. Just sort of realised.
Sorry, not Jo.
Yeah, just sort of realised what an asset it would be, and just took her on full time. So
that's
amazing.
I have to say, cold calling is something that leaves me shuddering. The first job I ever had as a 16-year-old in my holidays was cold calling, and it was the scariest thing ever. I was good at it, but I hated every minute of it. Ronnie, do you engage in cold calling?
No. In a word, could be an embarrassing question, but no, we don't do cold calling. But I've got a client who will use only cold calling to generate leads. So they see it as the way forward. Again, it's very targeted. And I think the interesting point about that interview is she knew who she wanted as clients. She wasn't cold calling in the sort of just picking numbers out of a phone book.
Yes.
She knew what she wanted to do. And therefore, I would say it's less cold calling because it's a specific target who, in theory, meets the needs that she's generating. So I thought that was a very good interview.
I think too, it's a little bit like Maud was saying, that she doesn't like to mention it at dinner parties, because it does have it has such a bad name, because you do get that really, really awful cold calls that you get that are not targeted at all, that just drive people insane. So I can understand her just keeping it quiet, what she does.
Yes, understandably.
Well, I mean, speaking of keeping it quiet, you've actually had success with cold calling, haven't you, Claire?
Yeah, well, before I ran my own business, I freelanced. So I freelanced for quite a number of years down in London for about 10 years freelancing, and I had to cold call. I didn't have any options. So generally you would phone up companies, see if they had any work on, that type of thing. And I used to hate doing it. I used to just have to brace myself and force myself to do it. However, on one occasion I phoned this particular company, told them what I did, asked if they had they'd any work coming up, and she said, funnily enough, somebody has just cancelled. So I had basically just phoned on the back of somebody else cancelling a job, and she said, do you want to do this job? It's in 2 weeks' time. So I said, yeah, sure, that's fine. Sent her all my details and everything, and I ended up working on and off for that company for 10 years.
Wow.
On the basis of that one telephone call.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, actually, Ronnie, you made the point that, just picking up the phone and calling a number randomly is not the ideal way of calling anyone for business. But let's face it, I guess in a way it's not really cold calling, is it? If you have an objective, if you know why you're calling, you know specifically who you're going to call and why, then actually in many respects it's not really a cold call, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the definition of a cold call, but I think we think of cold calls as was described earlier on. If you get that 6 o'clock call as you step in the house and somebody wants to know if you want double glazing, and you're looking around the house and you think, yeah, I think I've got it, so no thanks. That's cold calling. But I think when it's targeted, yes, obviously you don't know the people, but in Maud's case, she used LinkedIn,
yes.
And there are lots of business directories, and because of LinkedIn, you can often find connections. So it's, shall we say, vaguely lukewarm lukewarm calling, but it definitely is more successful, and a lot of people do use it.
And actually, you've led nicely in there for me, Ronnie, into LinkedIn. She did mention LinkedIn and how she uses it very specifically. Again, do you use LinkedIn? If so, how successful is it for you?
I use LinkedIn to find out about people I'm meeting, so I don't use it necessarily to generate leads, and although we do as a business, we post quite a lot on LinkedIn. But if I'm going to meetings, then I always use LinkedIn to research either the company or the person I'm meeting, because it's actually much more helpful when you know who you're dealing with and you know a little bit about their background. And again, you usually find some point of commonality, whether you worked in the same part of London or you did a degree in the same place or whatever it is. There's some area that binds you together, and the sales process obviously is about providing a need for your clients, but it's easier to build that relationship if you've got some point of common interest, and it could be from chocolate to football clubs. It doesn't really matter. Absolutely.
And we could do a whole show on what you should have on your LinkedIn profile. We won't cover that tonight. Yes. Yeah. But certainly is a valuable tool. Now, the other thing that Maud did for us, and apologies earlier, Maud, for calling you Joe, was to give us some tips for cold calling. And so here are Maud's tips.
Jot down some bullet points, because if cold calling isn't your normal function, you'll probably be really, really nervous. And when you're nervous and you're on the telephone, everything can go out of your head. So I would jot down some points, check that you are speaking to the person you think you're speaking to, by name, full name. And I think the key thing is to check, is it a good time? We haven't spoken before. Is this a good time to catch you just for a couple of minutes and explain why I'm calling? I think that's the crux of your opening. If you open with something like that and it's a bad time, the person will tell you and will be very happy probably to tell you when's a good time to catch them later in the day or the next day. And that's the best way to open. And then when you do get hold of the person to have a conversation, they at least have a few minutes to listen to you and discuss something.
Now, Maud, what do we do about the reception? For most of us, if you phone a larger company, you get caught by the receptionist, don't you, before you get to the person you talk to? Is there a way around that?
It varies. Occasionally you'll get a receptionist that really blocks you, and it's very difficult to get through. So if you get one of those, the only thing you can really do is try calling early, try calling at lunchtime when you may not be there, try calling a bit later. There's not a lot you can do if you really get blocked by a receptionist. You then have to perhaps go to LinkedIn, see if you can find some contact details. That's always the best thing to do, first of all. Mm-hmm. See if there are any contact details on LinkedIn. If you're lucky enough to have a tool, maybe like Zoom Info or in the US, Discover.org, which gives you something you pay for if you're with a bigger company that has a tool like that. They're incredibly useful at times. A lot of switchboards don't block, and you will get through to the person if they're picking up. One tip is to ask the switchboard if they would put you through to the person's mobile, because a lot of switchboards, if you ask, will put you through to the mobile, and you can certainly check with them if they have it. They'll look up and see, and they'll let you know if they have it or not. So the next time you ring back, if you don't get the person that time and you ring again, you know whether to ask for the mobile or not. So that can be quite useful.
And Maud, just tell me, is there such a thing as a good time to phone? Would you not, for example, phone on a Monday morning? Is that a rubbish time to phone, or a Friday afternoon?
So I would say, call any time. Okay. I'm in the IT industry, and the best day of the week should be Friday, because a lot of IT people work from home on a Friday, which means they're not in physical meetings. So you have a better chance of catching those really senior people. So Fridays is always a good day. You'd ring up, you'd check it's a good time, and then you'd say, the reason for my call is we'd love to meet you at your office in London and show you the value of whatever it is you're selling. So be very clear at the beginning, is it a face-to-face meeting you want? Is it a 30-minute conference call? So that the person is absolutely clear in their mind from the very beginning who you are, what it is you want, and then they're much more open to listening, because they're not waiting to see what it is you want. They know at the beginning it's crystal clear.
Yeah, and also they have the option to say no from the beginning, which is polite, allows them the power, if you like, to say no at the beginning. Maud, thank you very much. And just a sort of final note, do you enjoy phoning? The rest of us don't enjoy phoning. We're very nervous for cold calls. Do you still enjoy making phone calls?
I do. I enjoy it. I enjoy speaking to people professionally. You hear some interesting things about their systems, their companies, their work, sometimes the problems they're having that we hope we can solve. So it tends to be quite rewarding, and the people that you're speaking to are actually really nice, as long as you catch them at a good time.
You could listen to Maud all day, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think that's the difference with Maud. You're quite happy to listen to someone with that lovely Irish accent.
Absolutely.
It's not a problem, is it?
Absolutely. And I think the point you made about enjoying what you do genuinely comes across. And so you can imagine, again, that also adds to the value of what she does.
I think the other thing that's quite interesting is Maud's phoning on behalf of someone else, and I think that's quite a big difference if you're phoning for yourself. I think one of the reasons that you get nervous is it's a sort of odd thing, but it's almost like a personal rejection. If somebody says no, that's what you're kind of dreading. So in a way, because Maud is that one step removed, I think that helps too, that it's not so personal, it's maybe not so difficult. I mean, what do you think, Ronnie?
I think that's a very good point. I think also she came across really confidently as well. So just listening to her, you would be sucked in really. Plus the fact that you do have a nervousness when you speak on your own behalf. Obviously, perhaps if you've been doing it for a long time, but there is a certain tension, and I think people don't necessarily consciously hear it, but there's an underlying reaction to it. So I know exactly what you mean when you said you don't like doing it, because I think we're all the same. But equally, I think as soon as there's something that gives you an in, whatever that connection is, either somebody mentioned you or it's LinkedIn or whatever, it makes it's a different ball game. You speak with a confidence and authority, and so it only needs the smallest hint of some kind of introduction, and you're away really.
I think giving people an opportunity to talk about themselves and their business is really important. Again, in the deep and dark past, I worked in a sales type role, and one of the things I learnt very, very quickly was the importance of not jumping in there and trying to sell them what I had to offer, and remembering that actually they need a chance to talk about themselves and their business, and people love to do that. And so if you can encourage them to do that, you also of course learn more about what they need and what they don't need, and you end up selling them or talking about the right services that you have to offer.
I think too, I remember Maud did some work for me actually a couple of years ago, and one of the things that she did get from all the calls was a lot of information. So just what you're saying, Roma, so even if she didn't get the work or didn't get the booking or whatever, she's still got a lot of information, and sometimes that's as good, if not better, than having the work, because you sort of know where you are, and it helps you with other things as well. I think the other thing too is people are very kind on the phone generally, so I think it's probably, even though you're nervous to make a call, I've never phone somebody and they've been horrible, but have you? But I still don't like doing it, even though that's the case. So that's terrible if somebody's horrible.
But again, going back to the lack of experience, invariably it was because I was phoning at the wrong time. I hadn't checked that it was the right time for them. All those things are important. As Ronnie says, the equivalent of the double glazing salesperson calling you as you walk through the door. It's just not what you want. But Ronnie, we've had tips and ideas from Maud. You said right at the beginning of the show that one of the things that quite often you find is that people are coming to you and they don't understand themselves how to sell their organisation. And one of the things you do is help them out with selling themselves more effectively. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I mean, in a sense, you mentioned it, Claire, just a few minutes ago. Is what you're doing to the client is you're bringing them a solution. So you need to let them talk and explain what their business is, and you need to see what their perspective is and how what it is that you do brings the client a solution. Because if you just go in there with sort of size 15 boots, all guns blazing, I do this and I do that and I've done everything, you're not going to win any friends, because you're not actually putting yourself in your client's perspective. So whatever the business, it doesn't matter what it is, you need to be thinking about what does the client do, what is their need. You need to listen to them, you need to engage with them and understand how you can help them solve a problem. Because if they don't have a problem to solve, then you're not going to sell them anything. It doesn't matter how fluent you are or how knowledgeable you are. And I think that's really important. And so, coming back to your question, Roma, we get our colleagues, our associates, to understand that requirement. You need to listen to your clients, hear where the problems are, or perhaps draw out of the client where the problems are, because they may say things not realising that actually that's where the problem is, and then respond to that. Let the client speak.
And out of interest, one could assume that virtual finance director explains everything that you do, but what sort of typical issues or support do you give to small business owners?
Oh, it's a whole range of things, actually. So it can be everything. As a service, we kind of run 3 levels. We run bookkeeping services and payroll services for clients, which are fairly self-explanatory. And then we provide financial controllers. So those are people who will provide a greater control and authority over what's going on, chasing debtors, issuing invoices, managing relationships with banks. And then the finance director function, which is where I'm involved, we look at everything from strategy, due diligence, forecasts, acquisitions or sales, due diligence processes, processing itself, replacing systems, improving systems, putting in management information reporting suites. Because a lot of clients, they run businesses and they don't actually know how they're doing. So if you can give them the data, you're not talking about creating hundreds of pages, but key performance indicators. We talk about KPIs a lot. What is it that makes your business tick? Understand what it is that they need and enable them to have that, and then they can see how they're doing and then they can measure it. So there's a whole range of functions, and we work across a whole range of industries, from pharmaceuticals to manufacturing to motor to financial services and general trade, really. And right all over the country, from Glasgow down to the South Coast.
And I mean, Ronnie, is there another way of getting clients that perhaps we haven't mentioned that maybe your organisation uses?
We spend a lot of time talking to firms of accountants, because they really understand what we do. They understand what their clients do and what their clients need. And we're talking about not the big 4 accountants, because they tend to want to do things themselves, but most other firms of accountants really get it. So we spend a lot of time cozying up, getting to know clients, and also, again, this is more specific for our industry, we talk to venture capitalists, companies that have venture capital businesses, because they're often involved with the SME sector, and they see the need for people to put a steadying hand on the tiller and help the owners and the managers and the shareholders, who are the venture capital companies, steer in the right direction.
So there's real value in identifying those companies that sit complementary to what you do, that Precisely. You might be able to collaborate with, that can help you get to your end goal.
Yeah, exactly, yes. It's people who understand us, and it comes back to knowing the client, who understands what we do. We talk to law firms as well, but interestingly enough, we find that it works better with the firms of accountants and the venture capital companies.
And do you find you're tending to deal with the same companies each time, or do you see that people are quite open to the opportunity of working together?
No, I think our range of clients is increasing as we get better known, and the services we've delivered. The business has been around for 14, 15 years now, and the nature of outsourcing, not just finance, but what you do as well, is becoming more and more popular because it lowers the overheads, sorry, accounting term, but for businesses, and it's much more controllable, and therefore you don't have to pay somebody a full-time salary if you can get just as good a service by outsourcing. And finance is finally recognised as one you can also outsource, and so that's been very useful to us. There's wider recognition there.
So going forward, Ronnie, and particularly in the light of this evening, is there anything that you might take away as a tip that you hadn't really considered before but you might reconsider maybe?
Not specifically, no, because there's a lot of the things here were, and there were some really good tips, but they come as part of the training package that we go through. We had a very good sales trainer who was very focused and gets us to be very focused, not to waste our time. And I think the message that she said originally was, don't confuse marketing with sales. Putting leaflets through people's doors is marketing, it's not sales. And if you can understand that, marketing is important, but it's not a sale.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a really, really important distinction. And, again, you're demonstrating very clearly what we've all talked about this evening, which is the importance of knowing what works for you and what doesn't. And I think also, it was a bit of a trick question in a way, because I was trying to see whether I could get you to say, yeah, we go ahead and try this, try that. I think there's a danger, isn't there, that people do jump on bandwagons. So that's a lesson in itself, isn't it? Not to necessarily assume that because someone comes up with an idea, you've got to try it.
I think too what was quite interesting was there was no one really mentioned social networking.
No.
And I think people do it, but I still don't think people get the majority of their work through Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. I think they're very good tools, but I certainly don't know anyone. Maybe I don't know, maybe an e-commerce business or something, but no business that I know gets most of their work that way. They still get it in, if you like, the old-fashioned methods of actually meeting people or phoning people, or as Joe does, go to trade shows. That was quite interesting that no one mentioned it.
And I don't think we'll ever get away from that, because we are human after all. And I think it comes back to Ronnie's point, the difference between marketing and sales. Well, as ever, we have had an extremely packed and fascinating show, and some great ideas and tips from business owners who are happy to share their successes. I want to thank Mike Meldrum from the Mortgage Mine, Joe Bain of Oyster Studios, Maud Haddon from Follow That Lead, and of course Ronnie Munster from EFM. It's been fascinating as ever talking to you, Ronnie. Lots of great ideas, tips and comment. And last but not least, my colleagues Trevor Merriden in the Twitter sphere, like saying that, and Clare McAnulty here in the studio. So remember, we'd love to hear from you, so why not tweet us or email us on thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
The Business, sponsored by Kingston Smith Chartered Accountants.
If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.